They've been really good the past, decade.
Yeah, on the force. Those Tampa Bay Lightning. I think they're going to take it tonight. What do you think, John?
But they all come to an end at some point.
What's
Every
that?
dynasty.
Every dynasty.
Look at the
Pats.
Penguins.
Yeah, Pats came down.
Well, Pats came down because one very important person left.
Yeah.
And
Who?
there was a coach whose ego was too big for the very important person.
Who do you speak of? Okay, so speaking of athletics, one thing we see a lot is what?
We're just going to jump right into the episode without having a conversation first?
Okay, well, good. Talk to me.
Okay.
Talk to me.
Nope. I have
Talk to me,
nothing
Goose. Do you even know what that is from? Do you know
of
the
course I
reference?
do. And that movie's not that good.
I didn't say it was good. It's actually a super racist movie, by the way.
Really?
There's one black guy in the movie. His name is Snowball. In every scene with him, he's just dribbling a basketball down the hall. I swear to God, go back and watch it. It's crazy.
I never thought about that. Well, you're probably completely right.
Welcome to the Move with MOTUS podcast. My name is Dr. Christopher Ellis, and joining me is personal trainer John Williams. We are the owners of MOTUS Personal Training and Physiotherapy. Together, we will discuss any topic you can think of when it comes to training and rehab. From the carnivore diet to hip impingement, you can be sure that all your questions will be answered. Enjoy this week's episode. So you ready?
But yeah, Top Gun sucks. Anyway, tendinopathy, IT band syndrome. I met a guy today with both.
This is a juicy one.
Is this a joke? Was that a joke?
No, that's a juicy topic.
Okay. Anyway, I'm just going to keep saying what I was saying. I met a guy with both of them today.
All right.
But it's pretty common because they come from a very similar thing.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. Patellar tendinopathy plus IT band. What, friction syndrome? Is that what they called it?
I just hear IT band syndrome, but friction syndrome would make sense.
Yeah, it's a bit of an old school idea. So they used to think, well, I think some people probably still think this, that there is your lateral epicondyle, where the distal part of your IT band attaches right by your knee. And the theory was when you move, the condyle kind of goes back and forth and rubs the IT band back and forth, and there's bursa in between the bone and the IT band. It irritates the bursa. But then they did all these cadaver studies and couldn't find any bursa there. So I don't know. And then there's the idea that, okay, well, maybe it's not the bursa, maybe it's just the IT band getting rubbed. And I don't know if that's right either.
What do you think it is?
I think the tissue gets sensitized from overwork. I really think the underlying culprit is a weak hip abductor.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, what do you think the actual pain sensation is being caused by? Of course, we can talk about where it's all emanating from, but just the root, not the root, but the thing that's happening.
Well, if you get into the pain science thing, the body is noticing something's changing there. So whether it's mechanical, chemical, metabolic, something's going on there suddenly differently, and then it gets sensitized.
Well, it's probably the same thing with tendinopathy to an extent. It's just a tension relationship that the body shouldn't be experiencing. So it's hey, there's something weird going on here.
Yep.
Try to not move that way.
Yeah, so if you... it's usually someone who just started running or suddenly increased the running or something like that, coupled with maybe some poor mechanics, which almost always boils down to lack of ankle dorsiflexion, coupled with weak hip abductor. And I'm talking relative weakness. One study found a 2% difference from the affected versus non-affected side in strength was enough to cause IT band syndrome in a runner. I mean, that makes sense if you think of
Say that one more time, that statistic.
If say you have left IT band syndrome and your left hip abductor is 2%, and this is measured by a dynamometer, 2% weaker than your right side, that's enough to cause that pain. But that's usually because it's you're sitting on the couch and now you're going for 5-mile runs every day, or you're a marathon runner. And so when you start to increase the amount of load, the amount of repetition, that 2% difference rears its ugly head.
Yeah, I was going to say that volume, the number itself isn't that big of a deal, but the volume at which that number is acted upon is a big deal.
Yeah.
1,000, 2,000, 3,000 steps at 2% weakness becomes a really big differential.
Absolutely. And I want to just go ahead and dispel a myth. So first of all, people get pain. They're like, oh, I got to stretch out that IT band. There is no stretching the IT band. Can't do it. it's tethered to your femur. There's a septum that literally attaches the IT band to the femur. So to stretch it just means, I don't know, you're probably stretching your glute medius, if anything. And I mean, I've worked on a cadaver and tried to take a scalpel and push through an IT band, leaning over it with my strength and weight, could not get through it. That's how dense and fibrous it is.
Yeah, and I think there was a study as well done, a cadaver study, that showed that it takes like 9,000 pounds of force to separate an IT band apart from itself.
Yeah, I believe that.
Something ridiculous. So you're not stretching the IT band, but you will stretch the muscles that attach to the IT band, which would be the glute max, the TFL. Those things could be stretched, but you're not stretching the tissue itself.
How many tight glute maxes have you come across?
Not many.
Yeah, almost never, right? And then the hip abductor is basically just standing. It's basically on stretch. TFL, there's a weird pretzel-like stretch you can get into, and it's really not effective. So I think stretching is not the answer for IT band syndrome.
No.
You can desensitize it. With the foam rolling, a stick. I used to do that a lot in the beginning of my career. I would just hammer that IT band, and the patient would be like, "Oh, it kills," and then they would eventually get better. It would take like 26 visits or something like that. But then I just kind of stopped doing that and just started focusing on getting your range of motion right in your ankle, strengthen your glute med, and then making sure you know how to step, land, jump, land correctly without the knee caving in. That's really, I think, another big part of that. And I think the majority of knee pain is all those things I just mentioned. Lack of ankle dorsiflexion creates an internally rotated position of the femur, so think knees collapsing in. And if the hip abductor is also weak, it allows for it to collapse in. So you just clean that all up, teach someone how to run correctly or walk correctly, whatever it is a culprit, and it usually goes away.
Yeah, and I do think part of these, it's not the root cause. Like you said, glute med is a huge issue.
Uh-huh.
But obviously the reason you're getting this overactivity of the quad, especially that lateral quad, is because of glute med underactivity. So what I usually prescribe to people at the beginning, this is what I told the guy today, quick fix is not going to solve any problem. It's the same thing with the roller I'm like, dude, just hit the foam roller, do it for a week, twice a day. You're probably going to have a short-term solution there, but it's going to keep coming back.
Right.
So what you need to do once you've done that for like a week, just to desensitize the area so you're not scared of the pain anymore, is, okay, now we got to do some lateral band work. Now we got to do some glute med strengthening, all those fun things. Ankle dorsiflexion, I completely agree with.
Yeah. So I don't think stretching is the answer. In fact, a lot of times you get a bursitis in the hip along with IT band syndrome. If you look at what an IT band quote-unquote stretch is, it's to put the leg in sort of a flexion adduction position, which puts a lot of pressure on the bursa. So I think if you got bursitis in the hip along with it, you should definitely not do that stretch. First of all, there's no value in the stretch as is, and then if you have bursitis, you could potentially make it worse.
Are you talking about the pigeon stretch?
No, picture yourself laying on your back. So you're supine. You grab like a strap, put it around your foot, and instead of lifting your leg up like a hamstring stretch, you lift it kind of across towards your other leg.
Oh yeah, I like that little iron cross, whatever they call it.
I don't know. It doesn't. It's not really valuable. I rarely use that.
I can't think of. Maybe like biceps femoris.
What about it?
You're probably stretching that a little bit.
Stretching your hamstrings?
But no more than if you just did like a split kneeling hamstring stretch, or just did a normal pulling your leg back.
Yeah, I don't really think hamstring stretching is that important either, believe it or not. Unless you can't bend over at all. It's just not. It's something we all obsess about. Oh, my hamstrings are so tight. But what does it limit you from? A sit and reach test?
Yeah, I'll agree and I'll disagree to an extent, because I think if you have really great mobility in that joint, and you can as an example, you'll see the best sprinters in the world when they do a B skip, which is pretty much like you do it like you're cycling your leg through.
Mm-hmm.
They can kick their leg all the way straight out and up high and pull through. So they got really flexible hamstrings and really mobile hips.
Yep.
Even though they're not going through that range of motion in the actual sprint, the sprint motion, that cycle is a lot smaller than a B skip. I do think training those range of motions does have some sort of value, but what that measured value is, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But there is a correlation between what they're able to do and how fast they are.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
As far as functional.
Right.
is
So,
concerned.
you got to match what the task is on hand. So, for the average person who's trying to, lift or whatever, or just play regular sports, like it's not super vital to have a, very flexible hamstring.
Right.
I will say I've fixed more issues around hamstring laxity than stiffness.
Hmm.
A hamstring tends to get weak, and that will cause more problems. So I'm going to spend more time strengthening the hamstring. And you can program in eccentrics, which will put a little length on the hamstring while strengthening as well. I've treated a lot of dancers who have super lax hamstrings, who've ended up with hamstring tears, and then they see a physio and they're told to stretch it. I'm like, no, strengthen that thing. I think we mentioned this in another podcast before. The Australian ballet has recognized this. They've stopped stretching the hamstrings altogether.
Hmm.
Because it's just, I mean, if you look at hamstring tears in dancers, it's through the roof.
It's so funny. They have such mobile joints. Like their hips are super mobile, their shoulders, and then you look at their ankles. A lot of them have really tight ankles.
They're on point all the time.
Yeah, they're always pointing down.
Uh-huh. Yeah, they actually get a flexor hallucis longus tendonitis really commonly. So that's where they stand on their tippy toe, on their big toe. So that little muscle is supporting your whole body, and I mean, I can't even do it personally,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a really common injury in dancers. Just straight up overuse.
So if we have some IT band syndrome in patellar tendinopathy, which usually go hand in hand because it's caused by the same thing. They might not always go hand in hand. It just really kind of depends on some of the movements you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
This guy in particular has been doing a lot of boxing. It's just a lot of dynamic movement, so you're probably going to have some direct linear pain as well as some lateral pain.
Mm-hmm.
So we would say strengthen the glute med.
Yep.
What else do we say?
Check out your range of motion, your ankle. Clean that up. Work on mechanics. Now, I will say that the IT band is under max tension at 30 degrees of knee flexion. So a little more than a slight knee bend. That's where it's under max tension. So if you think of a boxer stance, it's probably around 30 degrees of knee flexion.
Yep.
So part of that's just volume management. He probably just started boxing a whole bunch suddenly, or he might have to give himself a little more rest or ramp up at a better rate and not just go weekend warrior style. Going to that point, there are some things too, a little bit counterintuitive. Running downhill can actually cause this because you're in more knee flexion running downhill than on a flat surface. Running around a track in the same direction instead of switching up can cause this too. Running slow as opposed to fast can cause it too.
Well, and a lot of that might even be the heel strike pattern that you decide to use when you run a little bit too slow.
Mm-hmm.
You might be kind of in between like a walk and a jog.
Yep.
And then you're going to heel strike instead of forefoot strike.
Well, if you're sprinting, you're pretty engaged. Like your glutes are on, your core's on, everything's like taut, right? You're jogging. I mean, just picture a jogger just kind of moseying by. What are the hips doing? They're all over the place.
Yep.
And every time that hip drops, it's going to strain the IT band from the top down.
Yeah, and that's one of the things people need to realize. When you decide to commit to running, you need to first off figure out how to run because it's probably the most challenging movement to do. And with that volume included, now you're looking at a really challenging movement that's super dynamic, that has a ton of volume involved. I mean, you're just asking yourself for an injury every single time, but you got to be engaged no matter what speed you're running. Right as you start going up, the core and the glutes have to be on, your shoulders have to be pinned back. You have to be using every single muscle when you do so.
Yeah, it's a skill just like anything else.
Yep.
Pretty high level skill, I'd argue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest. Very few of my clients have learned how to run because they can't squat right yet. They can't deadlift right yet.
Yeah.
They can hardly hold their core in place. They can hardly hold their hips in place. I can't have them.
Yeah, if you can't get
running.
into some typical archetypal shapes like a lunge or a hinge or a squat, if you're missing range of motion, it's causing compensation. That's a very controlled setting trying to do a squat, right? If you're running, you're not thinking about all that stuff. It's function oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So, the wheels will fall off the bus pretty fast if you're missing stuff like strength or range of motion.
Mm-hmm. If you want to talk about, this is totally off topic, but no, it's actually a little bit on topic because we're talking about
We always go off
pelvis,
topic.
the hips. This is just part of the podcast.
That's what we do.
If you want to talk about running and how important the hips are to running, there's a few videos you can watch. You can watch Eliud Kipchoge. Obviously, you're not going to know how to spell that, but if you just search sub 2 hour marathon, his face will be on every single video you find. If you watch him break the sub 2 hour marathon record and you watch him with his pacers, watch the guys who struggle to keep up with him and then watch him. there's one major difference you're going to see is at his hips. His hips don't move. He's staying in pelvic neutral the whole time, and he's not flexing back and forth. All those other guys, there's just these little tiny movements at their shoulders, their thoracic spine, their lumbar spine that's just slightly less efficient than him.
Yep.
That's going to create more efficiency, but it's also going to create more effectiveness in your ability to run longer without injury. And then if you want to look at a sprinter, they actually are almost like gyrating side to side and back and forth because they need to generate so much force. So the hips are the powerhouse when it comes to running. So
it's
if you're
your
getting
main engine.
It's yeah, exactly. So if you're getting a lot of that, lateral pain and that patellar pain, percent chance it's probably coming from your hips.
Yeah. What do you think about jogging? Jogging.
Sorry, we're gonna have to redo this whole episode.
No, what's wrong with that? You never heard that jogging?
Ask the question without saying the silly thing.
What are your thoughts on jogging?
Just what do you mean?
Any value in it?
So I don't usually use the term jogging like seriously, and like if I'm gonna program something, it's a percentage of intensity of a run. Anything that's a run is anything over a walk. A walk is just anything, any sort of gait with a heel strike.
Yeah.
Once you're out of the heel strike range, which you shouldn't be running with a heel strike, and once you have a flight phase, now you're running, and then it's just any sort of percentage above that. A jog is just a slower run, right? It would be like a 30%, 40% run at the most.
Yeah.
No, I think jogging has value, but again, you have to learn the mechanics first. Running's really hard.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason in my mind to jog is to build up to running faster.
Yeah, you want to be. You should have a pretty intense pace for a long period of time. Like if we look at Eliud Kipchoge, and now obviously this is a world-class runner, he's running 13 miles an hour for 26.2 miles. So you can run faster than you think.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's insane. That's everybody. That's most people sprint, but you can run faster than you think for longer than you think you can. You just have to do it carefully.
Agreed. Yep. So I think that a lot of people will jog for weight loss. I think that's the main reason people do it, right?
Yeah, that LSD, that long, slow distance.
Yeah, which I think is, I don't want to say it's been debunked, but I just don't think it's the best use of your time. I mean, I think I think there's nothing wrong with steady state cardio, besides the fact that it's completely boring.
Well, because there is that one physiological thing that was it the R quotient, something like that, where you get at a certain intensity of exercise, you're in a fat burning state because most of the energy required to do that exercise can use fat storage versus carb storage.
Like aerobic versus anaerobic training.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, do I think there's like not that much value in like longer, slower distance running? No, but again, like you can run faster than you think for longer than you think. You can't just try to push the limit a little bit.
Yeah. I
think higher intensity stuff's more valuable because at the same time, really what you're fighting for most of the time, unless you're trying to optimize your body composition in some sort of way, unless you have all the time in the world, you're just trying to optimize calories in versus energy expended if you're trying to lose weight.
Yeah. Okay, here I come in with my insulin carb thing, right?
Go for it.
Okay, so basically, if you're trying to exercise...
How did we get here? We were talking about IT band syndrome.
We did an episode on ankles and ended up talking about porn stars. That's how we did. Anyways, so the goal for weight loss is to get into ketosis, right? Burn fat. That's what ketosis is. So if you eat a carb meal and then you get on the treadmill and run for an hour, you basically have to soak up all your carbs first. Especially if you're doing steady state, that's going to take a while. If you even do it, it might take a couple hours to get there before you start even tapping into your fat stores.
Yep, I think that's a great point.
So first of all, cut back the carbs. But most of your carbs live in your muscle tissue. Some in your liver, but something like 80 to 90% is in your muscle storage. So what's one way to soak up all that carbs? Use your muscle, contract it. So yes, your muscles are contracting a little bit. We like getting on a bike. But if you're doing heavy resistance training, you're going to soak up those carbs way faster and trip ketosis way earlier.
Yeah, and if you think about it, especially when we talk about weight training is probably one of the best ways to do this because, of course, I think you should implement a little bit of like high intensity stuff into your weight training, especially if you're not just going for like powerlifting, strength building. But again, you're using the muscles like you said. You're soaking up those carbs. But then your heart rate is at like a, it'll be like a 55% or so throughout the whole thing. Or like a, probably, maybe if you're usually at like 70 beats, it's probably like 100, 110. So that's going to be a fat burning state for the entire time you're doing the strength training. So I think that's another great way to, and then just eat less food.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're trying to lose weight, resistance train, cut on carbs. That's my recommendation. I do think it's important to run just to be a functional human. You just
running's,
but I don't think it's not my go-to for weight loss.
I completely agree. I don't think that's the point of running. Right. I think running is the best exercise you can do. I think it's the most important thing you can do. First of all, if we talk about just the things you need to do in life when shit gets bad, you need to be able to run and run far and do it quickly.
Yeah.
So I think having the ability to run and run well is super important. But I also think, just go on a hard run, and that's probably going to be the hardest you work your entire week.
Yep. Just builds a more resilient human, basically.
And if you're able to solve that, tendinopathy and IT band, like that should be your next step. It's like, okay, well, I want to apply this now. I want to apply these healthy muscles to running.
Let's get into that patellar tendinopathy for a second here. So, because I think the mechanism is really the same thing. So, again, lack of range of motion in the ankle leads to internally rotated position of the femur, which puts that quad tendon or patellar tendon on a sort of a torsioned angle. And I think that's the main culprit. It's high load in a less than ideal position.
Yep. Yeah, I think I completely agree.
Yeah, so you're correct. The treatment approach is exactly the same. Sometimes you'll find a super tight quad on top of that too. That's pretty common. I just saw a kid today. He's only like 17. I got him prone. I can't get his knee bent. I don't know. I can't get his foot to his butt. At his age, he should be able to do that with no problem. In fact, I'm 44. I can still do that. I think you should always try to maintain that range of motion. I see a ton of knee pain, which is just really a tight quad compressing the patella into the joint. So sometimes that goes along with it too. Well, that's all I got, John.
Yeah, not a super complex one. I was having this conversation with my mom, not about this in particular, but you don't have bad knees. You don't have a bad back, bad shoulders. There's just there's some root cause of these issues that when you solve them, you feel a lot better afterwards.
Totally. Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing is we're just a culture just likes to image everything. So it's like, oh, there, that's your culprit. You got some arthritis, coupled with a meniscus tear. We got to go and do surgery.
And, that's what I like about this podcast, too, because we talk about very specific things. Like, hey, if you have a pain here, here's the problem, here's the solution. And we're very pinpoint. Like, we just kind of point out very specific things, like the vertigo, pain on the top of the foot, ankles, porn stars, like all of it. But no, I think that's the thing. We want to try to provide people as best as possible. Here's the little thing you're dealing with, and here's the thing that's causing it, and here's the solution to the thing.
Right. Agreed.
We're doing good work, man.
Let's keep it up.
Maybe.
All right, let's end it.
All right, that was a good one.
All right, John. Next week.
Yeah, I got work to do. Let me go home.
Bye. Do you have unexplained pain? Or do you wonder just how healthy you are? When was the last time you had your blood tested? Blood chemistry analysis is a great way to stay ahead of any health conditions, and now you can have control of your health with Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked is an incredible company that sends blood tests to your home. You can choose from over 30 different tests, whether that's liver function, testosterone, micronutrient, cholesterol, or C-reactive protein, which is a marker for inflammation. It's sent to you with free shipping, and you get results in 2 to 5 days, no physician referral needed. Use the code DPT20 for 20% off. Go to letsgetchecked.com and use the code DPT20. Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you have any questions you want answered, find us on Instagram at MOTUS Naples or send us an email. You can fill out a contact form on our website, which is motusnaples.com. Make sure to check out our blog and our shop as well, where there are downloadable programs that we'll continue to update. This is the Move with MOTUS podcast. We'll see you next week.